Welcome back to the Tiffany Thomas Sew Along. In this video, we are going to be discussing the yokes and all the different applications for the various views. I'm starting with the view D yoke, which is the smocked one. This particular yoke, the upper yoke and the lower skirt, have a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So you need to be aware of that when you're making your piping so that you trim your piping to a 1/2 inch. I have cut out and pleated my insert for this view. In your pattern, you will have an armhole curve that you need to draw in after you pleat this. So you're going to pleat it, flatten out the outside edge, and draw in your curve with your blue washout marker. Then I also made a mark at the 1/4 inch seam line, and I pulled the pleats out to that level all along the top there. I did the same thing for the opposite side, drawing in the armhole, pulling out the pleating threads to the 1/4 inch seam line. And then you need to be aware that the lower portion of the shirt is wider than the upper portion. So before you tie it off, you need to tie it off so that it measures the same as the lower portion of the shirt. You can see I tied it off evenly, and I've pulled this in a little bit so that the upper shirt matches the armhole curve lines. So you want to make sure you count your pleats and have your centers marked. I'm making mine as a ready to smock, but you certainly can smock yours first and then put it together, whichever one you prefer. Whenever I attach the bodice and the lower portion of the shirt to the smocked piece, I always do it the same way. I sew the piping to the bodice, and then I press the seam allowance back so that it's wrong sides together. Then I get my wash away wonder tape, which is a water soluble basting tape, so it will come out. And you want to apply this tape. It has one side that's sticky and the other side is paper for now. So you want to bring this across the yoke, or the lower portion will do the same thing. And then you peel off the tape portion. And it comes off quite easily, and you probably can't see this, but you're left with this little sticky tape film there. So the next thing you want to do is align the cut edges up here together, and also the cut edges at the armhole curve need to be aligned. So I typically will do each side first, and then when I flip it up, I want to make sure that my center marks are exactly at the center. So once I know that they're at the center, I will also pull that up. So you may have a pleating thread left in here that you can use as a guideline, and that's great. Once you do that, you kind of finger press this down, and now my yoke, you can see it holds pretty well. So now I can take it to the machine, and I will stitch one thread closer to the piping for the upper portion, and then I will repeat that process for the lower portion. And of course, after that's done, you want to trim your seam allowance and finish the seam however you choose to do that. So I've stitched my yoke and the lower portion of the shirt to the smocked insert. I've gone ahead and I serged the seams to finish it, and I cut out the armhole curves on each side. Now that this front is complete, the construction of the back and the remainder of this top is exactly the same as it will be for the other views. This is view E, which, you know, again, it has that flat lower top. And then view F has the pleated lower area on the top. So whichever one of these views you're using, you are going to pipe the lower section of the front yoke. So you're going to apply your piping to the lower portion on your front yoke. On view F and view E, you're going to continue with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you're going to pipe the lower portion of the front yoke, and then you're also going to pipe the lower portion of the back yoke. And for that, I have my fold line marked. I also have the center back line marked, but you're going to stitch your piping on up to that fold mark. And at that point, you need to fold the piping back. And I just stop the stitching right at that blue mark where I've marked the back. So I stop there, go back a couple stitches, and then cut the piping off, giving yourself a little bit, maybe a 1/2 inch or so to work with. Then you want to remove your cording from that section to reduce the bulk. And whenever I remove cording on a short section like that, I will stick a pin through the cording and the top so that you don't inadvertently pull it and it starts coming out from the other end. So you would remove the cording from past that fold mark, and you're going to remove the 1/4 inch cording, your seam allowance, on this edge of it. And then you're going to do the same thing on the other back yoke. And the reason for that is so that the cording stops right at the fold here, and you can see it with the red quite easily. I've got the cording, it goes right up to the fold, and then it stops there. And I do that on the underside as well. So go ahead and attach your cording or your piping to both the front and the back yokes, and then you can sew the front and the back yokes on. As you can see, I have cut my back pieces on the selvage, and that's what the instructions tell you to do, is to cut it on the selvage. I did pre-wash this fabric. It's been washed and dried a couple times, and you can see that the selvage behaves exactly like the rest of the fabric. It didn't shrink up or do anything funky. There's no ripples in it, so I felt safe using the selvage. I would highly recommend that you do wash and dry your fabric before you use it, because if your selvage acts funny, then you want to finish this outside edge. And it can be finished with a tiny zigzag stitch, or you can even turn this to the inside and stitch it down, you know, right along the folded edge there to finish it off. Or even if it's a casual outfit, you could even serge this seam. So you do want to have a finished outside edge, and mine is finished on the selvage. Once your piping has been attached to the back yoke of either D, E, or F, you can align the yoke to the lower section of the skirt, I'll call it. You're going to start sewing a 1/4 inch seam, and then when you get to the piping, you can sew, you know, the way we've sewn piping again, another stitch closer to the edge of the piping. But because we haven't piped the facing, it doesn't need piping. You just want to stitch that at a 1/4 inch. And if you're not sure where that is, feel free to use your blue washout marker and put that draw that 1/4 inch line in so that you can get that accurate. So I have attached the facings to both the front and the back, and now I'm ready to do my shoulder seams. So I'm going to go ahead and do those, and you want to put your shoulder seams in and finish that seam. So if you're not doing a French seam, you need to do something else to finish off your shoulder seam so it has a nice finish to it. Once I get that stitch down, I like to ensure that I've got the piping close enough, and that looks good. So then you're going to want to finish this seam with whatever seam finish you choose to do. I will likely just serge mine.